Hey everybody, welcome to the Wednesday, March 9th edition, had to look at the date there for a moment, edition of the Carolina Weather Group discussion. I am Ricky Matthews and not Scotty Powell, who's usually hosting this. Scotty is enjoying spring break like many folks in college, including Kit and Cody and a bunch of our regular folks who are on. We've got myself and Shay, who just rejoined us, to talk about a little bit of Farmer's Almanac weather tonight. We've got Rich Rogers joining us from Augusta, Georgia, and he's going to talk a little bit about the accuracy of the Farmer's Almanac and why people should trust it, maybe not trust it, and what he learned from his little study on that. So first off, I'm going to let Shay introduce himself, just kind of give him the horn and ask him what's going on down in Charleston, South Carolina. A lot of beachgoers down in your region this week?
Yeah, we've had a few. I mean, still have cold water temperatures, so we're about 58 degrees now on sea surface temperatures. And can you hear me okay on the microphone?
Gotcha.
Okay, we're good. Okay, just making sure I had to reboot there. High pressure offshore, nice, very beautiful spring-like weather here. We're hitting mid-70s, mid to upper 70s during the daytimes, and we're looking really, really good this week. We're hoping that torrential rainfall out west is not going to make it this way. I think we may have a reinforcement of high pressure sometime late weekend and continue the southerly flow right into next week. So rain chances increase a little bit, but a little bit of background. I'm with Wind Alert with WeatherFlow, and we do wind forecasting up and down the southeast region for any of the viewers that are familiar with our products, Wind Alert, iKitesurf, and windsurfing products and apps. So that's what we do here along the coast from Jekyll Island, Georgia to Cedar Island, North Carolina, and up into the Great Lakes and the West Coast as well. So back to you, Ricky.
Microphone muted. There we go. So we're working out the kinks here. Most of the time I don't host from the start. Scotty does it, so I'm like out of my rhythm and out of how I normally do this. So normally I handle the interviews, but Rich will bring you in because there's no one else here on the panel tonight. It's a small group, but a happy group to have you joining us tonight and talk a little bit about the Farmer's Almanac and everything. But since you're a first-timer on our show here, let's talk a little bit about where you're at, your DMA, and then that way people have an idea of where this kind of study was conducted.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. And it's actually the second time I've been on, but it's been a long time. It's been over a year ago, so I'm glad to be back. And I'm in the Augusta, Georgia, Aiken, South Carolina market. Work at the NBC station here, WAGT. We go by NBC 26. And so I've been here for 9.5 years, believe it or not. And so pretty familiar with the area. I'm from here, so that it's kind of neat to work in your hometown when you get to do the weather. And so one of the things that I do weekend evening weather usually, and when I'm working during the week, one of the things that I do is to do these sort of interesting weather stories on different topics that people might be interested in. So one of those happens to be the Farmer's Almanac, which I'm sure we'll get into soon. But I've been doing some stuff on that and other topics, and we have a segment called Storm Tracker U, and so sometimes we will feature stories about things that the general public may not know about, kind of explain some meteorology stuff to them, and sort of an informative weather segment that comes on during our newscast.
I apologize because it for some reason in my head I was like, he has to have been on our show before. I was like, maybe it was an episode I wasn't on. So first time with me, I think, at least on the panel. I don't remember you being on.
I think we were talking about cold air damming, if I remember correctly,
right.
the last time. So, but it has been a while. So.
It's been a while, but we're glad to have you back. Let's put it that way. So, but you talk about the Farmer's Almanac, and people, seem to relate to maybe the old Farmer's Almanac, but you didn't really study that one. You studied a different version.
Yeah, I'll hold it up. I don't know. Here it is right here. Yeah. So this one, I guess you pronounce that Blums. I'm not really sure. But I went to the local drugstore back in the fall, and probably early fall, and there's about 3 or 4 different Farmer's Almanacs that they were selling. And the reason I picked this one was it kind of made it easier to decipher for where we live what the forecast was. And so they break it up into different regions, and I don't know if you can see, but here's the East Coast region, which of course includes Georgia and South Carolina, and then you've got different regions. Now, different almanacs break it up in different ways, and one of the almanacs had our area sort of right on the line between one forecast area and another forecast area. And so I thought, well, that may be a little tricky to kind of figure out exactly what they mean. So I wanted to purchase one of them that, is more evident to determine what the forecast was for our area. Now, even though on the map, I'm sorry to cover up my face, but anyway, even though on the map they show the entire East Coast as one region, it does give some description that kind of narrows it down to Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast, or New England. And so there are sometimes descriptive qualities in their forecast that kind of break it up even farther into smaller regions. So I've been watching their forecast since September of 2015. This one came out probably not long before that. It says copyright 2016, but it was printed in 2015. But anyway, I've been checking that for our area, and done a couple of stories, actually about 4 stories on it now, and its accuracy varies, let's just say. So.
Yeah, I watched all 4 parts of that series, and it started out a little rocky, and it seemed to get just a tad bit better as you went on into January, and then there was some promise there for a couple of weeks, and then it kind of fell apart again.
Yeah, it sure did, and I meant to print that out. I do have it on the computer behind me, but
I can share screen that for you, and let me pull it up here.
That would be great. That would help a lot.
Let's see. Let me know when you can see it.
And Joey, I'm not sure if you're still in the room, but if you are, maybe you can share that for us and make that the default. Not sure. I don't think he's there. But anyway.
I saw it pop up for a second. There it goes.
There you go. Thanks, Joey. Yep, we got it.
So you can kind of see a trend already just by glancing at it, and I've kind of highlighted the different dates that it forecasts for, color-coded it based on whether I thought it was a good forecast, a bad forecast, or somewhere kind of in between. So you can see the month of September was not too promising for this particular version of the Farmer's Almanac. This one goes back to 1828. They've been publishing it since 1828, at least that's what it says on the front. And so it's been around a long time, and I don't really know what their forecast methods are. I'm sure that's probably sort of a secret thing, I would think, but just take, for example, as we look back in September, their forecast, for example, September 1st through the 3rd, right there at the top, in the book it says fair, then scattered rain showers, New England, turning unsettled southeast. Nope, I'm sorry, that was October. That does not match. Let me flip back to September. So ignore everything I just said. Okay, so the 1st through the 3rd of September it says thunderstorms clear East Coast, then turning pleasant. Hurricane threat along the Gulf Coast. Otherwise, thunderstorms clear the Atlantic coast, then turning fair. So what I was doing, if it's talking about a hurricane on the Gulf Coast, that's kind of far away from here. So I'm not really focusing as much on that information as I was the thunderstorms and then turning pleasant. And there happened to be no hurricane along the Gulf Coast anyway. But here it was warm and dry, no thunderstorms at all. And so that's just an example of kind of how I went by what the Almanac was saying for what could be considered our area versus what actually occurred.
Now, did you ever contact anyone with the Almanac or try to reach someone and say, hey, how are you coming up with this? Is this just an average event for this week? In the past, if you were to total up, would there normally be a hurricane threat along the Gulf Coast for that week? Sure, it's close to the peak period.
Right.
But it's kind of, you could just throw that dart anywhere and.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously they were probably going by climatology, and we're leading up to the peak of hurricane season and when the Gulf tends to get more active. And obviously this year we had sort of a quiet season, so it didn't favor the Almanac's forecast on that. I don't know. I have not contacted them. That would make a good follow-up story. Maybe I can get some information from them about how they do that. I have not gotten into that part yet, but I have noticed that when you talk to people, some people just swear by the Farmer's Almanac. And the Farmer's Almanac said it was going to, if we get the forecast just slightly off, well, the Farmer's Almanac said it was going to do that, and I really, truly am trying to see how accurate they are. I didn't expect them to be accurate, honestly, but I thought, hey, maybe they will be, and I'll find out one way or the other. Most of the time since September, more often than not, it's not really anywhere close to what actually happened.
Mm-hmm. So
we can take a look at some more examples as we go along, but that's the gist of it.
I was just going to ask why, and but I mean we can go through some of these first. I was going to ask the next question: why did you pick this one in particular versus the old almanac?
Right, and I don't remember what the configuration was, how they divide their forecast regions, but that probably is why I chose this one, because it was the easiest to look at and pick out our region and not be confused by a neighboring forecast region that may be very close by. So that was probably the reason that I chose this one. I remember looking at them in the store trying to figure out which one to get, and that was one of the things I wanted to be able, especially the first time around of not ever done this before, so I wanted to be able to do it in a way that I was able to understand what they were saying for our region and not have to look across an imaginary line that another almanac created that may be too close to call for our area.
And so when you pick these dates, and I think you may have slightly mentioned this before, but when you pick these dates, why begin in September?
Well, that's not long after. It's actually the first month in the Almanac's forecast, so I'm assuming it came out probably in July or August on the store shelves, and September is the first month for this particular edition, and it goes all the way through, oh gosh, let's see, I'm still flipping. It goes through next year, or rather through the entire year of 2016. So
16-month calendar.
Yeah, you almost got to think harvest season starts right around this time.
Yeah, and that's true. And I'm sure that back in the day when we had a primarily agricultural economy, this was probably about the only thing people had to go by. Whether it worked for them or not, I don't know. I guess we'd have to ask Benjamin Franklin or something. I'm not sure, but.
It seems like a lot of the forecasts, though, Rich, in the book are pretty vague, and so it seems like they're almost setting themselves up to have a 50-50 shot of accuracy. I mean, think about hurricanes in the Gulf in September, or for one of your examples, you wrote pleasant weather and changeable skies. Changeable skies mean from cloudy to sunny, like.
Exactly, and there are some phrases that just are not very descriptive, and so they can kind of get away with these phrases, and then the average public might think, oh, well, it wasn't that bad of a forecast, they were pretty close. But changeable skies could mean anything. I mean, you could have snow, you could have hail, you could have clear skies, you could have anything. And so one thing I wanted to point out, we had record-breaking heat on Christmas Day in our area. We set a record high that day. Well, for that period, as you can see, it said fair and cold, and it was not cold. And it also rained a lot on Christmas Eve, so totally wrong there. And that's a part of the year a lot of people pay attention to. So that's just one example. Now you can see at the beginning of the year, January, the first 7 days, it was pretty accurate. For our area. The first part of the month here in the Augusta-Aiken area was somewhat mild, and we were drying out from all that rain in December, and then it did get increasingly cloudy the 4th through the 7th, and then we started to see the Almanac's performance drop off again for the rest of the month.
Yeah, like the changeable skies.
Yeah. Oh, and look at January 24th through the 27th, and I will.
No prediction.
Yes, and it doesn't actually say that, but what it does say, and the reason I put no prediction is because it did not specify the southeast. It only talked about other regions on the East Coast. So, for example, it said, storm hugs the coast on its way north. For the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, snow initially, then as milder air is drawn in from the ocean, expect to change to rain. So it's talking about a storm going up the East Coast, but it only speaks of its effects in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, which we're not in either of those regions. So that's why I put no prediction there. And so, of course, that period was going to be wrong.
So how did you go about picking between a bad forecast versus perhaps a so-so forecast?
Well, it's subjective, based on what they're saying, and then I look at what we actually happened here. And if they got, maybe at least half of it right, but not the whole thing, I would give them a so-so forecast. Let's just pick one out here. February 16th through the 19th, sun and clouds is what they forecast. It was rainy, but then we had drier and cooler weather after that. So it started off rainy, but it didn't rain the entire 3 or 4 day period. So I thought, well, they didn't mention rain, but it didn't rain the whole time anyway. So it was kind of an in-between forecast. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't good either.
Are these day breakdowns here? I noticed you have them separated in 3 day increments. Is that what their forecast was?
Yes, they break it down every month. It seems to be the same days. So, the 1st through the 3rd, the 4th through the 7th, the 8th through the 11th. And then February, of course, that was a little tricky because they did the 24th through the 29th, which, the other months are the 24th through the 27th. But, and by the way, that period was wrong for us as well. They forecast rain, and it was windy and cold and dry here. So, then right after that, though, they had a good forecast. For March 1st through the 3rd, I'm trying to think if there was some other interesting points as I went along. I'm going to look here for a second and see if I can find some other stuff. But basically, if we look back overall, I put September as poor performance overall for the month of September. For October, if we scroll back up to October, you can see there's a little more yellow and green than some of the other months, which is a good thing for the Almanac. And so for that month, I kind of graded it as a mediocre performance. And then every month since in November, December, January, and February, not too impressive overall.
So it seems like the winter months almost are more, in terms of weather, obviously it can be more volatile, since especially in this El Nino pattern that we're in, when we've had flip-flops of warmth and then cold, and then weird December and everything, where we had near record warmth. So it almost seems like, perhaps an El Nino year would be worse than maybe a neutral or a La Nina year.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, did they factor El Nino into their forecasting? And again, I don't know exactly what their forecasting methods are. That would make a good story, but of course they're probably not going to share, their secrets. So, but I don't know whether they factored that in or not. And I do know that here in our area, we had the 3rd warmest winter since records began at the regional airport where they're kept today, and that's going back to the early 1940s. We just finished up our 3rd warmest winter since then, and the 11th warmest since 1900. So that's just a side note, but and the Almanac doesn't really go into those kinds of overall trends through a season either, not to the best that I can tell.
Well, Rich, since you and Ricky are only 2 TV guys, I think your forecast needs to have changeable skies at one point or other in the next several days.
I'm going to use that the next time we go from like cloudy to sunny. I'm just going to put changeable skies.
Yeah, well, or we could just simplify and call it changing skies. But yeah, I'll say I learned that from the Farmer's Almanac, and or the Blum's Farmer's Almanac anyway. So yeah, I don't think we can get away with that. Don't you think the public would hold us a little more accountable than that?
I don't know. It depends on our DMA. My DMA is a lot of rural areas sometimes, so I may get away with it. I'm not sure about you, but.
Oh goodness.
But Rich, you may have covered this. I'm sorry I joined in late, but what was your viewing area? Your viewers. I mean, when you did this research, did you ask them and kind of take a poll on how many actually do follow the almanac and who just looks at it maybe casually? I mean, did you find any numbers out that way? And again, if you answered that, I'm sorry.
How much hate mail did you get?
Well, I haven't gotten any hate mail yet. Now, this may elevate the possibility of getting some hate mail, but I know members of my own family have. My granddad specifically, not to call him out, but he reads Farmer's Almanac and has for years. And I used to read it when I was younger and just thought it was interesting. And over time I realized, well, it's not. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. And so as I got into working in television and forecasting the weather, people would always say to me, well, the Farmer's Almanac says blah, 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 blah. And I would say, well, that's great, but it may or may not happen. And so my purpose here was to try to determine, is there really anything behind it, or is it just, something to sell a book? I don't know. But so far, it's not looking too good as far as their accuracy for this year.
Now, I was wondering if maybe there's a certain season that it maybe hits on a little bit better than others. I think you said, was it October that fared fairly well in your area, but I was wondering overall if there was a particular season that it got more accurate than any of the others.
Really, October is the bright spot so far for the Almanac, and it was not really a good forecast. It was just, you could kind of give them a pass for October, but it wasn't really like a stellar performance by any means. So, so far that has been the only month that I would say it's been okay. Now, as we go into the spring, it'll be interesting to see if that changes, or the summer. As I was saying earlier, this particular edition goes all the way through December. So, I would think, though, that like any forecast, the farther out in time you get, the worse it would get. But again, maybe it won't, and we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and find out as we go along.
So you plan on continuing this all the way through the end of the year?
I hope so, at least through the spring and summer, and I may pick up a new one around the end of summer, and because they do come out about that time of year. So I don't know if I'll follow it through all the way through next fall or not. I may just pick up or maybe start on a different edition and see if another publisher's almanac turns out to be better next year. It'll be interesting to see. Which
will be interesting because, as you said, it comes out in September, but this one's good through December. So is it going to be the same forecast in this year's book versus last year's book for September through December?
That's a good question. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and find out. This is the first time I bought one in several years, so I'm not really sure how they do that, but I will definitely keep an eye out for that. I'll keep this one a while and compare it to the next edition that comes out.
Hey, Rich, you mind if I see that map again, the map of the sections? It looks
Sure.
eerily like a time zone map. So that's kind of what I was thinking there, if they're breaking up into different time zones for lunar phasing.
Well, they do actually have a time zone map right here that's actually in color. That is not exactly the same as their forecast regions. Let me see if I can find that again for you. And it's fairly close. Let me see here. Yeah, it's approximately, well, they combine the Mountain and Pacific time zones into one region, but other than that, it's fairly close to the time zones. Can y'all see that?
Yes. Very interesting. So, yeah, the Blum's Almanac seems pretty straightforward as far as just kind of simplistic recipes and a little bit of weather, a little bit of fishing. And I don't have the copy of the book in front of me, so you're seeing a lot more than I am right now. But the old almanac seems to have a lot more available online. They have lunar phasing percentages at nighttime. They have articles about herring fish, how they are affected by spring tides, and they go into a little more detail. And I've always found some pretty interesting stuff coming out of the old almanac. So I'd be interested to see how this one finishes up, and if you switch to another version of an almanac, how that works out.
Yeah, and this one does have a lot of information in it as well, sunrise, moonrise, so forth and so on. And I've just noticed here for July, for example, it's got the best days to plant above ground crops or plant flowers, transplant. And for whatever reason, there are random days that it tells you to do these things. When to kill farm meat, when to set hens in incubators, and so forth. And I won't go any farther than that, but it's got all kind of stuff in here.
Curious, does it say any time maybe this month when they expect the last freeze or for the area?
All right, let's see. For March,
But I know that's a question now that we've all popped into the 70s finally, or 60s maybe for Ricky's area, but
80s here for tomorrow.
Goodness.
Yeah.
We had 79 here today.
Wow.
For Easter, it says unsettled Easter with rain or snow for the northeast, fair skies farther south. So I guess it's saying unsettled in the northeast, and then kind of around where, our region where you are and where I am, it's saying fair skies. Windy for the Gulf states, it says.
That's funny. It's such a broad stroke there. Unsettled for the northeast. You could say that for most of the year up there.
Yeah. It doesn't. I don't really see where it says a last freeze or anything like that. Let me flip to April just to be sure. It has said previously like a hard freeze down to the Gulf Coast or something like that during the winter months. I have caught things like that, but I don't see anything about when the last big cold outbreak might be. And we may have already had it. Who knows?
Rich, does it suggest when to start planting?
I'm sorry. What was that?
Does it suggest when to start planting?
Yes. Well, like I said, each month it has days when you should plant seeds or plant above ground crops. Let me see. Even in the wintertime, I guess for certain things you could plant them in the wintertime, and it's got dates for that as well. But it doesn't really say when it's safe to start planting. I know that's an issue around here, and where we live, the old adage is don't plant your flowers until after Easter. The only thing is Easter moves around on the calendar every year, and the weather's different every year. But that's kind of a rule of thumb that people go by, is not planting until after Easter. And we have the Masters tournament here coming up first full week of April. So people like to get their flowers out as early as they can, kind of spruce things up for everybody coming in town. But sometimes we can get a wide variety of weather just in that 1 week. We could have near freezing conditions all the way up to highs in the 90s. So a little bit of everything is possible that particular week of the year.
So when sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I was going to say, my grandfather, he swore by you had to plant on Good Friday. On the Friday, not after, on the day.
Did you say Good Friday?
No, yeah, Good Friday. Sorry, I'm kind of in and out of the room, not sitting right in front of the computer. But yeah, he was. It had to be on, not after. He had to plant on Good Friday every year.
Maybe it's a good luck kind of thing. I don't know.
I don't know. He always had tomato plants. He had gardening before he got too old. But every Good Friday, man, I could string up tomato plants like nobody's business. By the way, I need to do my entire life doing it.
On a side note, we've missed having Joey on here. We really need him to get his internet back. One, so we can hear him better. And two, so he can just be back on here giving us stories like that. So get back on here quickly, Joey. Come on.
Now, Rich, does that book that you have, people think Almanac, especially in the nautical community, they think of all kinds of sayings and quotes and, what is it, red sun at morn, sailors be warned, red sun at night, sailors delight. Is there a whole list of those kind of sayings, and what are some of the unique ones that you found?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't looked through the entire book. I will tell you there's a lot of advertisements in here. Of course. So that takes up a lot of the pages. But I have not seen that, and that's not to say it's not in here, though. Usually when I'm looking through it, I'm at work, and so I'm doing a multitude of things at once. It does talk about the eclipse that we had today in part of the world, so it's telling about that. And that's a section called The Wonders of the Sky. There's an eclipse of the moon coming up March 23rd, so that's interesting, but that's over the Pacific Ocean. It's saying Hawaii. We'll see that. And meteor showers, it tells you the dates of the meteor showers, so a lot of people interested in that.
It's a lot of astronomical features that are fairly on target for what the science world calls for nowadays in modern times.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure that kind of thing is probably very accurate in here. But let's see. I'm flipping through as we're talking to let you know what else is in here. But a big chunk of it is the weather forecast for each month, and they've got, we're all familiar with this kind of map here, kind of your hardiness zone, so to speak, where you know what types of plants you can plant in your particular region. And we're in zone 8 here in Georgia and South Carolina, with the exception of the mountainous regions. So that means it's showing your lowest temperature between 20 and 10 degrees each year, and that's about right for where we are. I'm sure it's colder up there in the mountains of North Carolina and Tennessee.
Just a little bit sometimes. Well, there are nice days when Scotty is stuck in the 50s, and I'm roasting in the 60s and 70s on the west side of the wedge. And you guys sometimes get in on that too, down in Augusta. Yeah,
we do, and it can be a difficult forecast. Part of, our DMA, and I mentioned this last time I was on, but our DMA goes almost to Savannah, and on the other extreme, it goes up to we border the Greenville-Spartanburg DMA, and Columbia, South Carolina DMA, and also the Atlanta DMA. And so it goes pretty far north, and so there are times across our area that we may have, for example, temperatures in the 30s in our northern counties, and then down south it may be in the 70s. Very, very hard to forecast exactly where that line of warm versus cold will set up.
Now I remember that cold air damming episode. Scotty, before you got on, I made a fool of myself thinking that Rich hadn't been on our show before because I did not remember the cold air damming show we did. And so I introduced him as a first-time guest, and I was like, that doesn't sound right in my head, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is why Scotty usually does the intros.
Yeah, that was a good show. Speaking of it, I know this isn't Almanac related, but you mentioned the Masters coming into your town. How is it preparing a forecast? Because you have the entire world looking at your area that entire week. So is there any little added pressure? I mean, I know we can't control the weather, but anything, but just trying to get all that information out to the multitudes of people who come into your area.
Well, we do see an uptick on our web hits that week. I'm sure people are Googling Augusta weather forecast and things like that. And I like to, when I show, we kind of will update some of our graphics to have a golf theme, and I like to show temperatures in Fahrenheit and Celsius that week, because we have a lot of people coming from other countries and they may not have a clue what the Fahrenheit temperature is. And so I'll put both on the screen for the next day. I don't do that for the entire 7 days, but I do it for the next day, like the par 3, round 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. And so people visiting from out of town who may happen to be watching or see our post on social media or something, they'll be able to read what it says and know what it means.
And Scotty, we do the same up here when the Bristol race comes around, because I think it was my 3rd or 4th week on air last year was when the spring race for Bristol came along, and it was that rain event that just happened to rain almost all day at the race. And trust me, it was a stressful moment, because people, that's our gym up here for that, 2 weekends a year. So thankfully my forecast was 100% accurate, and I called that hole at 2 o'clock that NASCAR utilized for 5 laps. But there was a hole, and then it rained again. But,
That was an important 5 laps, because 2 of my least favorite drivers wrecked in that time. So that was all right with me. But yeah, it's interesting. I can't wait. Maybe we can get you back on, Rich, before the almanac runs out, and kind of compare to the spring and summer months. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it has a good history at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet money on it at this point. So, but we'll see. You never know. It may improve. At least, even if it's not accurate, we may see some improvement in the next couple of seasons, and so that'll be interesting just to see whether it does or not, or if it gets worse. Like any forecast, the farther you go out, the less likely you are to be accurate. So I'm wondering if that's the case with Almanac as well.
Have you got any feedback from the news department or your anchors who sometimes joke with us saying the same thing of, you're not as good as the Farmer's Almanac?
Not really. They're pretty supportive, because they want the public to know that your most accurate source is your local weatherman, and or weatherwoman in the case as it may be. But they kind of will kind of smile when they read the intro, things like that, and kind of tease the viewer to see what's coming up. But yeah, they're pretty supportive about what we're doing, and again, I'm not doing it to prove a point, although I suspect that I am proving a point that it's not the best source of weather information.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what you go on to next. I'm going to be watching this one, of course, and then the old almanac as well. And the more I look at it, I've been kind of browsing at it a little bit throughout the show, and I'm like, man, they've got a lot of stuff. I mean, they're one of the best known ones, and they've got weather stations, they've got rain gauges, cookbooks, they've got a little bit of everything going on, including wind forecasts, or not wind, but weather forecasting. They have what they call, I think, weather whisperers, and there's an actual climatologist on there talking about severe weather, and yeah, it'd be really interesting. So these kind of topics always pique my interest, because there's some of these outlets end up having a pretty good amount of great information in them, if you know what you're reading, and then there's other information that you got to kind of be careful of it. But yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, someone was asking a moment ago about did it have, I think, Scotty, you were asking about did it have anything about freeze dates in there, and it doesn't really have a forecast for that, but it does have a listing of the average killing frost dates in the spring and the fall. But what's interesting is, for Georgia, it lists the cities of Cornelia and Rome, which are not. Rome is a sizable city, but it's not one of the larger cities in Georgia. It doesn't mention any large city in Georgia, so I'm not sure how they pick their cities. South Carolina, it's got Columbia and Charleston, so those are 2 large cities. And then North Carolina, it's got Winston-Salem and Southport listed, but it's just 2 cities from each state, and it tells you the last average frost in the spring and the first one in the fall. But I'm not sure why they list certain cities. In Tennessee, it's got Nashville and Knoxville. How Georgia ended up with Cornelia and Rome listed. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's
too.
kind of. I would think coastal and then inland along the coast, but yeah, that is kind of odd.
I know where Rome is, but where's Cornelia at? Is that? I'm not familiar with where that is in Georgia.
I believe it is in northeast Georgia. I'd have to look on a map to be sure, but I believe it's sort of as you get to the foothills.
Very interesting. Well, guys, do we have anything else, or?
Sorry, I was looking at some. We had those controlled burns, as you know, Scotty, in parts of the Linville Gorge today, and it looked like some of the smoke made it up into our region too. And so, finally made that connection of what that white cloud in the eastern sky was all day long today. So.
Yeah, I think there was 2 or 3 that they were doing this afternoon. So, I would say, well, Rich, we appreciate you coming on tonight. You want to plug your social media outlets and how our followers can get a hold of you?
Y'all are breaking up a little bit, so it's hard for me to know what you're asking. It's coming in and out.
Scotty was saying, I don't know if his internet was breaking out, or maybe it's all of us, but he was giving you an opportunity to plug your social media accounts and stuff like that. This is not going well. Were you back? Hello.
I can hear you in and out.
All right. Well, we're trying to give you an opportunity to plug your social media accounts.
Gotcha.
So if you want to do that, go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Facebook is Meteorologist Rich Rogers. And on Instagram, it's RichNBC26, which I think is up there right now. So RichNBC26 on Instagram, and then Rich Weather on Twitter.
Yeah. All righty. Sounds good. Scotty, I don't know if you're back. I think we're having maybe across-the-board internet issues here because Rich was going in and out a little bit. We heard everything, and I was going in and out a little bit, and I don't know what's going on. But it's a good thing we're getting close to the end, and we'll try to let you take us home.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, Rich, we appreciate you coming on tonight. Next week we have Mike Smith will be joining us. He's from AccuWeather, kind of does some of his own stuff as well. We'll be talking about just the different aspects of meteorology inside the field. So we look forward to having Mike on. He was sick a couple of weeks ago, so this is a take 2 edition with Mike, and we appreciate him coming on. And Rich, once again, we appreciate you coming on, and we'll get you back on maybe towards the end of summer and kind of see how everything's wrapped up with the Almanac.
Sorry, y'all are kind of coming in and out. I apologize.
That's all right. That was the perfect reaction. So.
Okay.
Maybe I'll come on again.
Maybe.
Just watch the replay.
Yeah.
All right, whoever's controlling it, you guys can shut her down. We'll go home for the night.
Joey, cut us off.